Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everyone will have a good weekend. Brian Jennings here, the Critical Sorcerer. This channel exists to discuss the nature of my relationship with Quentin Tarantino and the movie critic. And so, I watched Frankenstein today. First time I watch a movie in a while. It's hard for me to watch movies now. Of course, apt metaphors abound, right? I am his creature, he is my father, he's my victor. But it was well done. I enjoyed it a lot. Guillermo. I'll probably send him a letter. I've decided to go through the whole thing again because I'm going to promote this video. I'm exhausted. I'm sick of talking about it, right? But until, right, there's some sort of like actual display of contrition, I have no choice but to assume that he wants me to die. That's like, there's no other way to interpret it. And so, I'm going to take my time. I know my last video I was running hot. I drank some alcohol. Everything that I said was true, but right, this is his ammunition against me, is that I'm not well in my mind. And he has put me in a state, right? But I am of sound mind. And so setting out, there's a number of things that we have to accept in our mind's eye. The first and most important is that there is such a thing as psychic phenomenon, remote viewing, and telepathy. And we all know that there is. That these things are, and this is because life is a psychic intellectual creature. Right? That consciousness is the progenitor of all life. That it's through a psychic intellectual pressure upon inert space that we see matter manifested out of it. And so it's through a similar tactic, though stepped down some 1,000 times magnitude, 10,000 times magnitude even, that we see the clairvoyant operating their psychic prowess accordingly. The second tenet that we have to accept in our mind's eye, these are all understandings of intuition and faith, is that all things that occur in an artist's writing, in an artist's creation, in an artist's acts of intention and will, stem from some psychological truth within them. It's masked in a myriad of ways, but it all stems from some primal truth within man. Hence the necessity for language, art, and writing. So, the one miracle that you have to accept, right, which is not a miracle if you accept the other thing, is that Quentin Tarantino is a powerful psychic clairvoyant who directs with his mind. And he has created a case study in remote viewing with the two of us as a result of me not giving him what he wanted last year at a screening of Jackie Brown. So I'm going to begin at the beginning, take my time. It's going to take a long time to tell the whole story. And hopefully I don't leave anything out, but likely I'll leave something out. And that's unfortunate. You can go back and see the other videos and hear other ruminations, and etc., etc., etc. And so I will seem, he has put me in a state that's a product of his design, and the dust is settling in my mind, but I have no reason not to assume that he is outright evil and will hit his breaking point any day and send someone to actually murder me. Okay. I decided that I was an actor in the summer of 2022. And around the time that I got into drama school in New York, I was living in Los Angeles, and I did everything backwards. I'm also a writer. My name is Brian Jennings. Right? I wear a lot of hats. Right? I'm also a guitar player and a singer. I'm also interested in visual art. Right? Who's that? Mike Simpson, Quentin's agent. But primarily I'm a writer. I also got into Shakespeare. I want to play Hamlet. And so I got into a drama school. And so I went to LA to be a writer and then New York to be an actor, when usually it's like crisscross. It's the other way around. Most people go to LA to be an actor and New York to be a writer. But I was writing every day, writing. And I'm writing something now. And it's a barrel of laughs, let me tell you. And so around the time that I got into drama school, I thought about the movie critic. Quentin had been at Cannes earlier that year. saying, I want to just start saying his monologues right now, but just gotta wait. I said, I should write Quentin. Like, I'd be a good actor for this movie. But I didn't have anything. I was just an asshole with a pen. So I waited. Went to New York, was doing drama school. I got cast in my first Shakespeare in January, as soon as I got there. And so by June, I had just finished my second Shakespeare, and I said, okay, I'm gonna write him. Why shouldn't I write him? Right? Yeah, he's never gonna reply, but I make my pitch, and I made the pitch. So I wrote him a letter, 2 pages, front and back, composition pages. And then as soon as I put it in the mail, I said, no, I have to be more specific. I have to, right? It makes sense to me. I have to make it make sense to him. And these are, right? He despises me now, but at the time, this was his most cherished letter that he ever got, I'm sure of it. Just like, right, I despise him now. But, so, sent the one letter, and then I said, no, I need to be specific. I need to say exactly what my point is, right? And so I wrote another one, and then I wrote another one. And after the third one, I said, okay, that's it. No more. It's weird if I write them all the time. And so I sent it to the New Beverly. And it all got returned to sender. Like, perhaps the wrong address is online. And so I found another movie theater that he owns in Los Feliz, Los Feliz 3. 1822 North Vermont Avenue. And so I wrote a fourth letter, right? Stapled them all together. It was like 15 pieces of paper by that point, 20 pieces of paper. Front and back, no blank lines. My headshot, my resume, which was comical. There's nothing on it, but a good-looking headshot, good enough-looking headshot, and my meager resume. And forgot all about it. I did my best to forget all about it. I stayed up visualizing that whole night. I said, I can, So the trades published shortly thereafter that he would be shooting the film at the end of September, and this was around July the 4th. And so I said, okay, that's it. I'm out. Of course, he's already cast the film. Like, it's done. And so my hair was a little bit shorter than it is now, but it was quite long on my headshot, and so I cut my hair in September. Because the other movie that I had it long for ran out of funding. And so every time I looked at it, it just reminded me that I wasn't working. And so I cut it and was living my life. I acted in The Tragedy of Cymbeline. I did my third Shakespeare in September. And the SAG strike endured until the end of November, around Thanksgiving. And so somewhere around like December the 10th or the 12th, I was acting in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, and the trades published that Quentin had halted his production until early 2024. I didn't think anything about it. So, okay, whatever. And so, right, while I'm sitting backstage, right, at The Two Gentlemen of Verona, all the letters came flooding back to me. And that was the first day that he was remote viewing me. I suspect he watched me the whole day, and then when he saw me at the theater, he said, oh, wow, he really is an actor. And so all the letters came flooding back to me. There's a lot of information, in those pages that I hadn't thought about in a long time. I said, oh, if this guy writes me again, you let me know, and all these things. And I got really excited. I said, oh, cool, this guy gets it. It's a strong pitch. It's badass. Hell yeah. And so I wrote him a letter immediately, and I said, oh, don't worry about my hair, and I stand by everything that I said, and we can do it, and it's going to be great. And I sent him a tape with me playing Django Reinhardt on guitar, note for note. Minor swing, and I did Hamlet, the introduction to the players. Welcome, masters, you are welcome. I am glad to see you well. Thy face is valenced since I saw thee last, etc., etc., etc. And so when they received it in the mail, I heard him say, oh no, he's upset about my hair. And so around the same time, right, of course, they gave me a bullshit role. Sorry about that. They gave me a bullshit role while I was acting in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, and so I was writing the whole time backstage, And so I would put my book down like this, so that I could sit down like that and open it immediately and continue to write. And so at the end of the show, it was oriented like this. And it took me the whole following day to really kind of like let it marinate in my mind, and I suspect that he was manipulating me in some way, but when I realized that the book was oriented differently, I felt that they left me no choice. It became obvious that they had opened my notebook, and there was like a feeling in the air, when the show ended, that they had violated me in some way. And so I went in there, slammed my fucking bag down, said, "Listen up!" Put the fear of God and everyone in there, and screamed at the top of my lungs till they threw me out. I mean, I don't regret that at all. Right? It's common courtesy. I shouldn't have to right? I shouldn't have to talk to people like they're 4 years old. And this is Quentin's argument for me, and we'll get to that soon enough. But after I got thrown out, I said, well, how do I turn it into a virtue? Like, how do I... So, well, the movie critic's about a writer. I should send it to Quentin. That's the play, so that's what I did. BK actor self-tape. That guy remembers me. He remembers that scene. His name's Elliot. He's a great guy. At the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And so, right, sent it. And I continued to write. I had no money, but I wrote as much as I could, a couple of more letters between the middle of December through the end of January. Right? Because after the 7th one, I said, I'm going to write this guy until he says something. I'm just going to keep writing him until he tells me no. Right? And so I sent the 10th one and gave him $1 billion system of projection, which is the future, where all of the frames are converted into NFTs, as well as the sound files. And I said, I'll give you that. That's, right, is that enough? Right? My hair will grow back fast. It's hair. And so that was all the way through the 10th. It was the 10th letter total. I sent 4 in the beginning, that first run, 6 months went by. And then I sent another 6 over 6 weeks. It was basically a letter a week. And then the trades announced that Brad Pitt was reuniting with Quentin for the movie critic. And he stopped accepting my mail. The last 2 letters I had in the mail came back to me. And that was a lot. That was a lot, for sure. To have given so much of my soul onto the page, all to just get him to say something. Right, and so I processed that for maybe a week. I didn't write again. I didn't write him again. I got it. That's right. And so after it processed in my mind, I said, okay, I get it. I misjudged this guy. He's not what I thought he was. So I get it. You're a famous guy. You think that I can write you 50 pages and you don't have to say anything to me? That's okay. Oh gosh, how quaint. This plebeian, this pedestrian, bore his soul to me. The burdens of fame. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna write about it. Right? I started seeing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in a new adulterated light. Right? And so I wrote a 7,000 word essay reminding the world that Quentin appropriated Brad Pitt's spousal abuse. This is what writers do. Cliff Booth murdered his wife on a boat and got away with it because Brad Pitt beat up his wife on an airplane and got away with it. He pulled the story out of the air and put it in the water, right? And it's a regurgitation. It's the same thing, right? That Brad Pitt fed the FBI a song and dance about how he didn't mean to, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they never pressed charges, but Angelina Jolie filed for divorce immediately. And so Cliff Booth says the same thing, right, when he comes back on the boat with his mutilated wife with a spear gun. Oh, I didn't mean to do it, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same story. It's the exact same story. And so after I published that, I said, what else can I do? And I said, the movie critic's about a guy who reviews movies. I should review movies every day in protest. I have all of these essays in these reviews, just so that we're all on the same page here. And so that's what I did. I reviewed 3 films, An American in Paris, Mr. Skeffington, and Gone with the Wind. And so it was about maybe 12,000 words over the course of a week. And so I tweeted the third one, 4,500 word review of Gone with the Wind, directly to Quentin at Q Tarantino tweet, which has a picture of him with a gun to his head, if that tells you anything. And that was on a Tuesday. And the following day, Wednesday, he canceled the film. That's what actually occurred. Right? No aloof artistic bullshit. That's what actually occurred. Right? That he was calculating in his mind. He said, oh no, I don't want this guy to keep under boycott the movie critic, to keep reviewing movies in protest, because eventually it's going to bring people to his essay, which makes the allegation that I appropriated Brad Pitt's spousal abuse, which got Brad Pitt an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Brad Pitt won an Oscar for beating up his wife on an airplane, and this guy is gonna is it true, is it not true? It's illegible and therefore damning, and yes, it is true. It's the same story. This is what writers do. Is it what they always do? No. But this is what they do. They write what they know. Quentin knows actors. Quentin knows show's business. He rearranged everything. Right? So Brad Pitt thanked all those women's feet when he got the Screen Actors Guild Award because Quentin equally debased him and fictionalized his destruction of his marriage. That's what it is, right? Like no more varnish. So I wrote him immediately. Whomever checks the fucking mail at 1822 North Vermont Avenue, they like, unless they just want to lie to everyone, right? There's literally like 20 people around him that all know, right? Stacey Sher, Tom Rothman, right? All these cats, they know. He was making the movie. He doesn't live in a vacuum. He doesn't get to go, oh, poo-poo, oh no, I don't like it anymore. No, they were doing it. So I wrote him immediately, refused at the door, right? And so I said, okay, I'm going to buy his book. And then again, this is all him manipulating me. That he started remote viewing me every day, every single day. And so I bought his book. I was reading it. And then he announced the screening of Jackie Brown in New York. And I didn't think anything about it. It's like, it's none of my business. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go. It seemed stalkerish. And so I was talking about it with my coworkers. I was working in New Orleans in Louisiana, slaving away, working outside, 100-degree heat, long sleeves, fire retardant clothing, like real work, you know? I wasn't on Days of Our Lives. And I was talking to my buddy. His name's Travis. He's a great guy. I said, I don't know what he wants, you know? Like, he doesn't want to talk to me. He doesn't want to... Right, cancels his movie. He still refuses my letters. Like, I don't, you know, like, what am I supposed to do? And he says, well, maybe he's doing a book signing or something. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Like, he needs to reach out to me. That's. And he said, well, maybe that's what he needs. And I kept thinking about it. I said, I guess you're right. Like, why can't I go? And so, right, I bought the $500 ticket. And he knew immediately. He knew as soon as I bought the ticket. He knew. He's watching me all the time. This is what he does. And so, it was like another 5 weeks, and somewhere like halfway between then and the screening, right, while he saw me reading Cinema Speculation, he said, oh, can you come up with any good questions? And so I prepared 10 questions, right? Went to New York, got there, the day before? Got there 2.5 hours early. Boom, I was right there in the front of the line. Waited with everyone. Had a bunch of nice conversations. Right, I brought my guitar just to like maybe play because I knew I had to wait there a long time. But I had such a nice time talking with everyone. I just ended up shooting the shit. Really nice people. I'm sure a lot of them remember me. And so in my mind, I was prepared to just like leave the guitar. I was like I knew that they might say, "Oh, you can't bring that in." And so, right, the screening of Jackie Brown was followed by a conversation with Robert De Niro and Quentin Tarantino. Boom, I'm in the front row. The film screens. It's a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed it. And the credits roll, and the director of the festival comes out, does her introduction, and then they come down from the top of the row, right? And so everything that he says is in relation to me, right? Everything like that, it's all right. That like he and I had been like cultivating this relationship, right? And so it's my fault, right? Like everything up until now, it's all my fault, right? That he wanted me to question him about his book, and then he would have revealed me as the movie critic. And so I had a letter in the book. We use this book as an example. He finishes, he looks right at me, he says, oh, I think we're going to end now. And so, right, he's got his back to the audience, right? He said, I was hoping you'd sign my copy of Cinema Speculation, Quentin. He turns around and he comes and he signs. He says, where do I sign? I say, anywhere you want. Wherever you'd like. I had a letter inside of the book, right? So he signs it, he gives me the pen back. He looks at me just for a second, then he looks up, I shoved the book all the way up to his face, right? But for the letter, I wanted him to take the letter. Right? All like this, all up to his face. Right? And so he stuck his nose up at me, and he turned his back on me, knowing that I had written him twice since he canceled the film, right as he canceled it, and a week before Tribeca. And so I did the same thing and left. And that's like, again, right? Like that's like, he didn't actually need to say more. Like he did enough in his way. He just didn't do enough for me. I don't want to have to trust the voices in my head. Right? Like, yes, he was making jokes about classical theater and like talking about getting a life-changing role and like all these things. Like, oh, subtlety, intuition, right? Like, sure. And in his mind, he said, oh, if he can do this good, I know he's good. Right? And so, I knew I blew it immediately, of course. I knew I blew it. I knew. There were people behind me in line to leave. Right? But I wanted to make it right. I knew immediately, I said, oh God, like I gotta make it right. I gotta make it right. And so everything up until that point, right, is all forgivable under the eye of God. Right? Under the spiritual origin of life. Because it's his movie. He's allowed to make his movies however he wants. And so if he expected me to, right, to succeed under some psychic crucible initiation trial by fire in order to play the role, then I failed that, and so I can't play the role, right? But everything that's occurred thereafter is essentially pure evil. That's like I'm almost sure of it. He must have thought of it immediately. He's, oh no, I'm gonna destroy this guy. I'm gonna at least make him seem insane. That's the nicest way of putting it. And really, he's wanted me to blow my brains out. He still wants me to blow my brains out. And so I wrote his agent immediately. I went back to work. So it's bullshit that we're still doing this. It's like, it's not enough that I spent $1,000 of my money to fly there. It's not enough that I waited 3 hours in line, right? That you still expect me to bark like a dog. And again, that's like, it's his movie, right? Like, of course, like I was being arrogant. And I started reviewing movies again. I said, this solves nothing, and that's true, right? It's like, this is why, right? Like, this is why it's David Fincher, right? Because I'm still alive. That's the point. Right? And so, the weeks unfolded. He kept watching me constantly. Right? And then after maybe like a week or so, my guilt really compounded upon itself. And I felt bad. So I'm going to, I wrote him a letter. So I'm going to make it right. And like, you can have my scene for free. And I'll do the movie for free. And like all these things. And, like genuine acts of contrition. Right? Which I suspect the people around him were like, seems reasonable. Right? But by the time I started building the planter, of course, he was just mocking me relentlessly. Watching me every night. Saying, oh, arts and crafts is for fags. And really ugly. Just, again, right? Like this is now we're stepping into pure evil. Abuses of wisdom. Abuses of power. Remote viewing is a wisdom, it's a knowing. So, after maybe like a week or so, they sent me somewhere else. And it was leading into the days that I went to go see Fish. I went to go see Fish in Indiana, and then I went to Delaware a couple weeks later. And of course I heard him. He said, this guy's nothing, he's ripping up my writing. And my spirit was broken in a big way. Oh, for sure, it was. Right? And so now, right? Now we're really stepping into the conspiracy of it all. And so there's two ways of looking at it, right? The first is that I had a psychotic break. Like that's like then you're eating his ass, you're feeding into his lie, you're taking your shoes off for Quentin. Right? But my point is that whatever he shows people to say, oh, this is where I told him, right? Because a bunch of people know that I'm the reason he canceled the film. He doesn't live in a vacuum. Right? That's an outright fabrication. That's like there is no document. Because if he had said something to me practically, it wouldn't have detracted in any way. And I would have been prepared. And I was prepared, but I was too aloof. He didn't, right? He turned it into an exercise in clairvoyance, an exercise in power. And so when he turned his back on me, I said, oh, He wants sovereignty over my mind forever. That's where my mind was at. And that's what he has now. We both do. That it's a case study in remote viewing, right? And so by the time that I go to fish, he's remote viewed me every day for 3 months, 4 months, long time. And so, right, while I was at fish, right, at the witching hour, right, boom, right, he exerts a dangerous psychic pressure upon me and reveals a woman. And so the following day, she's digging around in my head all day, calls me a weird vagabond and a literary scholar and some nice things and some rude things, and stole all my secrets. And so again, right, the idea is that he wants me to seem insane. He wants me to, right? He says, that's the best way of putting it. Like the honest, the truer way of putting it is that he wants me to blow my brains out. And so, at the very least, right, he has to make me appear insane to everyone around him. Right? Because he's saving face, right? He went through all of that and set that whole fucking thing up and rested it all on his psychic clairvoyance. That's my point. And so there's a big part of me that thinks that the people around him are like, he didn't sign up to play your fucked up mind games, right? He didn't make you cancel the film, right? That you went out of your way to do all this when you could have just spoke to him. So you need to talk to him. So he has to do something anyway, right? So after like hours of that, I was waiting for the shot. I said, what do you want? You want me to go there and scream at the top of my lungs? And he said, yeah. Right? Again, catering, right? Feeding into, right? Pure evil. And so I said, okay. Funny guy, right? Oh, you play fucked up mind games. I get it. So I flew to LA immediately. Went to WME. Of course, they didn't. They threw me out. They threw, of course they did, because, right? He wants me to appear insane. He doesn't actually want me anywhere near him, right? He doesn't want to reconcile, right? And so I said, okay. I went to a taping studio, did it as a scene, went back, slammed it on the table, put the fear of God in everybody. They escorted me out, right? So the days unfold. They get the shit in the mail, right, through Mike Simpson, his agent. This guy with Moloch on his head. The things that people call clairvoyant and remote viewing are the same things that people call magic and sorcery in centuries past, right? Different words, same thing. So, he's back in my head immediately, right? And so, I had one secret left. Right, that I was worried I had AIDS. I'd been celibate for a long time. And so they stole it from my mind the following day with tactics as old as time immemorial. And so I went to fish, and I went back to Delaware, and said, I wish you well, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't really talk about it at all. I talked about it coming in, but the whole weekend I didn't really talk about it. And that Monday I started writing about it, and I wrote a bunch. I didn't really write that whole weekend either. I ended up in New York, and I got my buddy to send me some money, and I got a room. And after like a day, that fear, like just the violation of it all, I said I had to know. And so I went and got tested. Now I didn't have it. I suppose, hopefully I don't have it, right? But they've done a bunch of evil shit, and we'll get to that in due time. So, right? Got tested, don't have it. Made another tape, wrote another letter, showed them the test, that there it is. Right? Now have I humiliated myself enough? Right? And so the girl, right, is revealed, right? She's in love with me, that she's his daughter, right? That's what he says. I've always known that the internet exists, right? I've always known that I can look up his kids, right? But in my mind, right, his daughter's a little girl, and that's a subject of contention with me as far as what they've subjected her to, and we could talk more about that in due time. But my point was that I wanted to trust it. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to trust the process. I didn't trust it at Tribeca. I wanted to show him, I'm listening, yes, I trust you. Like, oh, that's great. Like, okay, great. Like someone's in love with me, right? And she says, oh, I've never, when you cursed me, I've never been more attracted to a man. And so if it's just a complete fucking fabrication, right? That what I suspect is that is actually some sort of like perverse metaphor for or analogy is that Quentin has never been more moved by an actor than when I sent him my scene about those actors reading my writing. That's right. All things that emerge in this saga stem from some psychological truth within them. And so the weeks unfold, and right, he finally says, oh, I'm going to announce tomorrow. And then the following day, my mind is just poisoned with notions of me wishing him dead, which wasn't true at all. It was all him manipulating me. Right? I suppose I want him to die as much as he wants me to die. That's like where I'm at with that. 100%. No more, no less. So this is why we're talking about it, because it's just ugly and dangerous now. And so finally, after days of that, I said, what do you want? You want me to go to LA with my money? And he says, yes. Right? And so I had one asset left, my Hasselblad camera, my analog camera, 2-inch square. And so I pawned it for $300, $2,000 camera, spent half of it on a flight. Right? All the while, they're just burying me in sexual lust. Right? All to get me to touch myself so they can laugh at me, and I never did. Right? So, while I'm walking to the airport, I think LaGuardia, I can't remember which one, but one of the airports, it turns evil. Everything turns evil again. And she says, right, and it's all him, or maybe his wife's involved. Maybe he has someone who's like his daughter. I suppose that's the other alternative, that she's not like actually his daughter, but she's like related to his wife in some way. And when I didn't give him what he wanted, he said, oh, I'll torture you with what you could have had, etc., etc. I don't know. I don't get it. He could have just left me alone and moved on with his life. Or paid me, right? Like that's what a cool person would do. Right? But they put up this other psychic test for me. She says, oh, I want you to stop me and kiss me hard. Again, all to get me in handcuffs. All to cry rape. Get me put in handcuffs. So he can go, ha, 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 ha. And so I was going there anyway. I said, okay, sure. So I'm gonna go to 1822 North Vermont Avenue. All right, and so that's where I went. And I stayed until he sent someone right by me. I'm sure of it. It was a girl. She had a dog and a hat. And I let her walk right by. I didn't do anything. What am I gonna do? Like, I'm not gonna do that. On top of, right, being who I am, which is timid in a big way. Despite how boisterous I am, I don't go out of my way to ingratiate myself where I'm not wanted. Right? And so I know that he wanted me to be strong. I know that that's like how he saw it in his mind. But I didn't want to, I wanted him to be honest and simple with me. That's what I wanted. So after I let her walk away, I said, oh, I gotta go to the hospital. I'm not well. Again, I've gone through the full 7 stages, right, of everything. Right? But it's all the same tactic, right? It's all the same tactic. The same tactic that told me to buy his book, that told me to question him about cinema speculation. Right? It's the same tactic that revealed the girl that told me she was in love with me, etc., etc., etc. And so I walked all the way across town to Cedars-Sinai in West Hollywood. It's like a 3-hour walk. And they 5150'd me. I spent 3 days in the hospital. I didn't have to say much. I told them the truth, and they said I was delusional. So after a day in the hospital, I said, oh, Western medicine can't help me. And that's still true now. That's still true now, that we're on a subtle spiritual level. And so it's about coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms is disclosure, is talking about it. So I spent my 3 days in the hospital. They got me a cab ride back to West Hollywood. I'm back on the street, writing every day, right? Just torture, just psychic torture all the time. Now she's a whore and she doesn't want to be with me. She's not real, that's the point. He doesn't have an adult daughter. Right? And so, like, I guess, like, in my mind, it's like, despite the fact that, like, I didn't want to trust it at Tribeca, and I was trying to trust it then, there also was this part of me that was like, oh, you violated my mind in such a way. You must want to be close to me. That was like my rationale in my mind. And of course, he's just a wicked, evil man. That's all it is. But it was a sick joke to him. To say, it's good that he didn't give me what I wanted because, right, like, he's actually insane. He's not willing, like, my daughter's a little girl, right? So my point is that, like, after I got out of the hospital, I said, okay, let me backtrack just a little bit. When I got out of the hospital, I said, okay, you keep telling me that this girl loves me, and so I'm gonna write a bunch of poems. I'm gonna write a bunch of love poems, just to show him, like, I'm listening, right? Not out of desperation, though, right? It caters, right, perfectly to this idea that I'm not well in my mind. That's how I delivered all of them by hand, and I'm sure he was laughing his ass off, going, "Oh wow, see, look how unwell my daughter's a little girl. She's a sweet little girl." And we'll talk more about that in terms of the science of what's occurring on the back end. But then it just degenerated into, oh, she's a whore, she doesn't want to be with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things. And I said, okay, I'm gonna write more writers about this. Right? Again, just to have him tell me definitively what he wants me to do, right? And it just took me all this time to realize he wants me to put a gun in my mouth. He wants me to hang myself. Because I'm a trusting, loving guy. I'm very gullible. And so I wrote a letter to Thomas Pynchon, Salman Rushdie, and David Berlinski. I had written David Berlinski previously, before Tribeca. And I had mentioned it, but I never said Quentin's name. And so I said, I catered right into his hand, talking about how, I'm in love with this girl, it's his daughter, and, made a complete fucking fool of myself. And I don't care about that. Like, I have nothing to regret about that. Being a loving, generous person, right? But eventually, right, he started plaguing my mind with David Berlinski, saying, "Oh, David Berlinski wants to help you, and he wants to help you play Hamlet." And I know this, the Discovery Institute is out of Seattle, and I know a girl in Seattle who's very pretty and charming. Her name's Hannah, and then Hannah's in my mind. And, it's all bullshit. It's all a dense braid of psychosexual torture to get me to blow my brains out. And so they want me to go to Seattle. And so I said, okay, sure, I'm listening, I'll go. And I walked all the way to Skid Row. I was walking like 12 miles a day. And I went to the homeless service. I said, I need a bus ticket to Seattle. And they brought me back. And I said, who's picking you up? I said, the Discovery Institute. And they said, huh? I said, yes, this place. I said, it has to be an individual. And so I found their number and I called them. Right? And they said, yeah, we've been getting your letters, but you can't talk to anyone. They told me to fuck off. That's like, right? And then it became clear. It's like, oh, it's more manipulation. Like, it's all the same tactic. It's all the same tactic. It's a through line. Right? From the moment he canceled that film, right? Really from the moment he halted his production in December, right? Some 11 months later, around leading into Halloween. And so right outside of the place, I got a free government phone, right? And then Hannah was revealed as bullshit too. That it's all just a manipulation tactic. And so I said, okay, I'm going to write about it again. And I wrote another essay, 9,000 word essay, put all my secrets on paper, like pure humiliation. I said, there it is. Right? And he said, you're a real asshole for that. And I said, well, what about Fish? What if I can get Fish to let me play on stage with him? And he said, okay, dude, fair enough. Right? It's all bullshit. He doesn't, never happened, did it? But I wrote my letter. I wrote my 2 pages. I said, like, would you consider, like, letting me play on stage? And I'll premiere the trailer for the movie critic on stage during Saw It Again. It was a good letter. 2 pages front and back. Didn't go on and on. Just asked them to reach out to his agency. And so that was on a Saturday. The following Monday, he said, there is no movie. Right? Oh, all our hearts are broken. She doesn't want to be with you. It's bullshit. There's no daughter, right? Like, it's a sick game to them. Him and that wife of his. Unless it's all him. And then he's just depraved, right? For, like, in terms of what he put me through. Right? But called my mom, said, I got to get out of this town. I can't be here anymore. There's nothing for me here. And so she puts me up And just as I was like, almost, it was like percolating, me getting out of town. I'm coming back here. I'm in Alabama now. They say, oh, Trey's writing, and it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Right? I was listening to Fish, and they manipulated me again. Like, why? I don't understand why. Like, this is the sickness of it all. Right? That I had a job. I was moving on. Right? He's not well in his mind. Right? He has a dangerous addiction to power. Right? And abuses the divinity within him. Abuses his wisdom to compel anyone to bend to his will. So, eventually, Trey wants to help me play Hamlet. Right? I have to go to New York. Right? Eliza wants to play Ophelia to my Hamlet. Eliza's in love with me. Right? The novel that I wrote about is called Building a Coven because he, right, fed my mind with all this bullshit about all these women loving me. Why? I don't know. He's sick in his mind. That's the point. And so, I ended up back on the street sleeping in an absolute hovel in LAX for another 10 days. I was walking like 12 miles a day. I was absolutely shredded. Had like 30 pounds of books in my bag. Walking 12 miles a day. And eventually, I managed to get a bus ticket to Memphis. All day, every day. He's just burying me in it. Right? Now it's like his father-in-law is in the mix. Right? His father-in-law had been dead for years by that point. Right? He's sick. He doesn't respect it at all. Right? He conjured that man's ghost from beyond the grave. Right? And again, he can and will deny all of this. Yes, I am aware of that. He's not just going to say, yeah, I'm a sick sorcerer, fuck that guy. But there's a dozen people that all know the actual reason why he canceled the film. Right? And it's because of me. It's not because of anyone else. So, I ended up on the bus just writing. I was starting to write my novel now. Writing. They're torturing me all day. Ended up in Memphis. I bummed around Memphis for like a day, and I said, I got to get out of this town. I can't. Right? So I started walking, and he wanted me to die in a ditch somewhere. He wanted me to get run over by traffic. Right? Still just burying me with the daughter, like, oh, I want your baby, and like all these things. And I ended up in a small town, and got picked up shortly before Thanksgiving. And so between Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve, I was very sad. I was very depressed. And they were around this time, they started like giving me notions of me killing myself in a palpable way. Very dense, very ugly, right? The highest, ugliest evil anyone could practice, as in reverse psychology, showing me visions of me blowing my brains out. And then saying, oh no, don't think that. We don't want you to do that. Right? Really, really high, ugly evil. And I did think about it for sure. So I was hanging myself outside of WME. And again, it was all for Quentin to just like breathe a sigh of relief and go, oh, wow, God, he's gone. And then everyone could say, oh, wow, poor you. Oh, you had to endure this man who's not well. And so on December the 31st, New Year's Eve, knowing what she looked like, what her name was, all by their design, not by me. I didn't want to look her up, right? I printed out her picture. Her name's Allison Tarantino. She's not related to him at all. It's obvious. She's the first bitch who pops up. A. Tarantino. He didn't even think to go to like the fourth letter of the alphabet. But again, it's about trusting it. I was trying to show my remorse. Like I'm a trusting, loving guy. And so I said, okay, I'm going to remote viewer. I'm going to remote viewer for the first time. I never cared about doing it. Never interested me. Psychic violation. And so, boom, I'm staring at her picture. He says, oh, you can't force it. And I say, who's forcing anything? This is how it's done. And they just, boom, they bury my mind in bullshit immediately. Right? Visions of her being a whore all night. Saying, I'm not a bitch while she's fucking other men. Things that no father would ever do, about a daughter that he loved and respected. And so I just kept remote viewing. I kept watching it. I said, no, you're going to, okay. I see. I thought she was real. Like I was still like believing it. Right? That not only is she real, but that she's keen on torturing me. Right? That he had raised a wicked practitioner. And in no time at all, she devolved into a prostitute who fucks men for thrills. And there probably is some sort of nepotism equivalent to that. I've talked about this before in other videos, where it's like rich daddy's girl's like, oh, I'm gonna get pregnant by a homeless guy. Take that, dad. Like that's probably true. Why not? Right? But eventually she degenerated into someone who produces porn with her father's money, and right? And so that persisted all the way through Sundance. He was like making jokes about her shooting porno in Park City right before he did his talk there. Right? And I have strong opinions about that as far as it degrading Robert Redford's soul and leading to his ultimate demise some 7 months later. And we can talk more about that in due time. But again, it was just about finding the truth. It was about finding the truth. Once I saw that he spoke there, I was like, okay, I get it. And shortly thereafter, he admitted there is no daughter, because I just kept remote viewing, kept trying to find the truth. And so that was maybe the middle of February. And then it became obvious. Like, oh, I see. I actually see now. You just want me to die. It became obvious to me in that moment that he's just going to keep manipulating me and fucking with me until I say, oh no, it's all so much. Death is better. Bang. Right? As far as it was a recognition that he has no intention of ever reconciling with me in any way, of ever spending any real time with me, ever forging any real memories with me. And so remember, by this time, he had been remote viewing me constantly every day for basically an entire year, for 10 months, 11 months. And so I decided to come clean. I've been trying to come clean ever since, right? I reached out to the press, wrote another essay. He's got the whole press in his pocket. No one's interested in honest journalism. He just tells them that I'm insane. He just lies to everyone. And so that's a big reason why I'm making this now, because I'm going to help him continue to lie to everyone. Right? I'm never going to kill myself. I'm never going to do that. And so it gets to be maybe the beginning of March, and Fish announces they're doing their shows at the Hollywood Bowl. And so up until then, I had written them 3 letters, maybe 4. By the 3rd one, I was like, I know he's manipulating me. But when they announced those shows at the Hollywood Bowl, I said, look, I gotta process my life. The book on the shelf, that's its own spell. Right? Can I come out and read a section from my novel about him canceling the film so that everyone knows what happened with the film? That's all. Didn't hear anything, right? And so the pitch was during what's going through your mind. Right? So those shows were in April. Around March the 24th. After it just, right? It's just ugly. It just kept being this like sick thing. I wrote aemanuel for the first time, right? I think he was the CEO at the time. I don't know that he still is. About Quentin of William Morris Endeavor. I said, are you aware of what's occurring right now? Like, do you understand what is actually occurring between me and Quentin Tarantino regarding the movie critic? Right? And so I suspect he reached out to him immediately and said, this is done. This is done. You're done. And of course, Quentin doesn't care, right? He just lies to everyone. That's why we're talking about it. Because, right, I'm not insane. I'm not a stark raving lunatic. I have nothing but love in my heart, right? And compassion, right? I volunteer at my church, right? This is, right, he slandered me egregiously, so I have to talk about it, despite the fact that, right, he can humiliate me. I'm essentially humiliating myself to the entire world. And so I have to be above it. For the sake of this condition, because it's ugly for both of us, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. So, didn't hear anything, right? Reached out to TMZ, no one says anything, no one gets back with me. Right? He just lies to all of them. And so I made 2 more monologues, right? 8.5 minutes and 14 minutes, 22.5 minutes, 2 takes, savage rage, right? where I went off on his agent Mike Simpson and our Emmanuel. And again, it's all catering to this idea, oh, see, look how insane he is, right? Sick, dangerous man, right? Who doesn't respect anything that he has. But, right, I'm sure they're not laughing because I'm all the way in their psyche forever. And I reserve the right to release those monologues at any time, and I'll let them deal with the blowback. So, April Fool's Day, he announces he's selling the script to Netflix. And so I knew it was bullshit. I still know it's bullshit. As far as he's being deceptive. Right? If David Fincher was on that set, Quentin had his hand up his ass like a puppet and was like using his mouth like a mouthpiece. And that's the story. But in any event, Fish did their shows in April. And so the first show, having not heard anything from anyone, I said, okay, I get it. I'm going to remote view Trey while he's playing. Right? It's easy. And so, right, while he was playing, right, and again, this is all catering to this idea of, oh, we're driving him mad, we're going to make him blow his brains out. Right? But it is physically dangerous as well, and we'll get into that in due time. But while I was trying to watch him, right, reciting the ineffable name of God, right, I felt this disgusting hypodermic needle, this huge hypodermic needle, all the way through, right? So, to backtrack just a little bit. I thought this was my idea originally, because, right, I'm wise and I know what to do if I want to destroy someone with my mind. But now I think that it was just his idea, that I'm all the way in his mind and he's a sick, depraved individual. But when it became obvious to me that he has no intentions of ever spending time with me, therefore he intends to perpetuate this diseased psychological condition in both of our minds, therefore he wants me to die so he can take his mind back, I had the palpable fear, and I still have it, what else is he prepared to do to see me in the ground? Short of murder. Right now we're at murder, and that's why I'm talking about it. That's why I'm still talking about it. But I had the thought he'll use hypodermic needles with diseases. Right, as far as voodoo doll fetishes, right? And we'll get into the mechanics of that in due time. But while I'm reciting yod, yod, hey, yod, hey, right? I feel this disgusting, he says AIDS, right? The pinnacle of blasphemy, right? To circumvent the name of God in such a way. From a Jewish man, no less. Right? But right? It hits my heart rate spikes, I start sweating. Right here, woo, you humiliated the master. I felt a bag of saline. It's really, really ugly. This is the purest, ugliest evil that anyone can practice on anyone. Right? And so this is my point when I said earlier that like, oh, I don't think that I have it, but they took real steps over at least poisoning my mind with the notion of them trying to give me AIDS, and I'm still not completely sold that they didn't have dirty blood there, that they didn't have like some sort of nurse that they paid. Why not? Can't charge them with it. This is a power no court can try you on. Right? And so when that occurred, right, I said, we're good. You keep that fucking scene. Shove it up your ass. Go anywhere else. No more. I submit. And so at the show, they played What's Going Through Your Mind. And they also played Bug and Possum. Right? It doesn't matter. Right? And so look at this. They're talking to him. Like he's telling them what to play. Like that's like this is his game. Right? And so when I sent the letter to them, it's also worth pointing out, about wanting to play with them, the following day Trey was on his solo acoustic tour. And he made the snide fucking quip, oh, I got a request from a guy online, from a kid online, not a guy, a kid online, and played What's Going Through Your Mind. Right? These are Quentin's games. Right? And so, right, I told him we're good. Cut to the Hollywood Bowl, however many days later. They played it again. It was like the only song that they repeated, What's Going Through Your Mind, as well as A Life Beyond a Dream. Right? My point is that like, just ask him. Just ask him. Ask his daughter, Eliza. I've emailed her several times as well. Who cares? Like, it's time to talk about it. Like, no. Right? And I know what they were telling him. Like, oh, he'll get it. Right? Because they're fucked up in their minds. And so after about a week of crude amicability, right? No needles. He said, I want you to sue. Right? This is in April. Right? And so I said, okay, sure. I have no money. But I looked it up. It's like $500 to file on your own to represent yourself. And so I put up a document, printed out all the paperwork, and it took me like 6 weeks to get a job. And I inevitably took a job sorting trash, and then I got a second job at a gas station. And so, right, the months dragged on, and it got to be like July, and there was still no resolution. I don't know what he expected to occur. It's not like I can just like snap my fingers and like produce $100,000 to sue him and get a lawyer. But by the time I got to work, like in a meaningful way, as far as like having a regular schedule, right, his torture, it kicked back off, right, where he was with the hypodermic needles, right, it's awful. I taste blood in my mouth. Right, and this is my point when I say like there's nothing stopping them from using diseases, right? Just to like see what sticks, right? Like why not? It's the pinnacle of evil. That's the point, right? And so the other side, right, it's the pinnacle of madness, right? But it's all the same tactic, and we'll get into that in due time. But eventually, while I was sorting trash, it was just an onslaught, absolute onslaught, and I'm doing everything I can to sue him to give him what he wants. Right? But then I got like really high on cocaine, and that depressed me so much when I thought about the diseases. And so I'd been to the hospital once because I was worried about the destroying angel mushroom. I felt a huge needle like in my side right here. Right? Again, right? It's psychological torture. I do acknowledge that. Right? There was no enzymes in my liver. And so when I was coming down from the drugs, I said, okay, I'm going to go. Okay, you did it. And I quit my job. I said, you did it. No more jobs, no more working. We're just going to talk about it. And so I went back to the hospital. Right, again, I've gone through like all of the stages of rationale. Right, and after about 2 days there, I said, oh, they can't help me. These people can't help me. Western medicine cannot help me. Coping mechanisms are the only thing that can help me. And so they kept me there for about 2 weeks. And I have a counselor, I have a therapist that I see, and I talk about it with him. And that brings us up to, essentially the present in a big way. It's like somewhere in August when I got out of the hospital. And I've been making these videos basically every day ever since. And so let's talk about the overarching pattern of behavior now. That Quentin also spoke at Cannes. He did a retrospective of whatever his face is, the 50s, Red Dawn and Comanche, I think they were. Not Red Dawn, but something in Comanche. Anyway, they showed 2 films, and then him and Elvis Mitchell. Elvis Mitchell knows who I am, too. All these cats know who I am. And so, right, while I was here, I don't look this man up. Like I have to now, but I wasn't then. I was moving on with my life. Right? And so they were just awful to me, like all one Friday night, right? And so when I looked it up, if I said, why? Like, what is the fucking problem? Like, what is your fucking problem, honestly? Right? And so then I looked it up and saw that he was speaking at that exact moment. And it became clear, like, oh, I see. Like he felt like he had to do that to keep his mind. But even though I wasn't fucking with him, I don't care what he does. Right? And so then I said, oh, I have to stay on him. I have to stay on him forever. Right? Like, I get it. Like, he wants me, like, this is what he wants. He wants me to appear like some weird crazed fan. And so that's what he's got forever. Right? Fuck you. And so eventually, I saw that he was getting, soon thereafter, I started looking up like his upcoming speaking engagements like every week. I saw that he was getting his Lifetime Achievement Award at Burbank, and I emailed all of them a bunch of times. Bunch of fucking times. Right? All those cats know who I am too. Right? That Hollywood dandy, Scott something or other, Feinberg. They interviewed him. Right? All those cats. Right? And so that ceremony was on a Sunday, but that Friday and Saturday, that was the first time that he really put it on me, right? That he's a dangerous man and he has perhaps in fact murdered people, right? I have no reason to assume otherwise, right? Why shouldn't I assume that he's prepared to actually do that if he's prepared to do all these other things? I mean, this is just as bad in any measurable way. They're trash spiritually. They have no right to anything they lay claim to, right? And of course, right, can't take anything with you, but they'll take their memories, won't they? So that Friday and Saturday was awful, the worst yet, absolute worst. And so Sunday, I just ate a bunch of pills and tried to sleep as best as I could, but again, it was awful all day. He succeeded in some way as far as me appearing insane, because he can and will always lie. That's like, he's interested in deception and cunning, right? He tells the press, oh no, it's not the right movie, because in truth, he doesn't want me to keep reviewing movies in protest, right? He sticks his nose up at my letter and turns his back on my letter when he wants me to question him about his book, Cinema Speculation, right? This is like, right? He tells them, oh, I don't want him to die, he's lost his mind, right? Because he does want me to die and he's lost his mind. Because he can't control mine. He can't compel me to suicide. Right? Unless he just buries me in it. And so that's where we're at. Right? And so, cut to maybe 1 month ago, 3 weeks ago. That whole weekend was just awful. It was just fucking awful. And in my mind, I say, oh, they're shooting my scene right now. I sent another letter to the press. Again, seemed like a fucking total lunatic, but he's just burying me in it, right? Again, it's all the same tactic. It's all the same tactic, right? The same tactic that he tried to set me up to be his last movie star with is now the same tactic that he's using to compel me to blow my brains out, right? That's like, it's all under the same overarching umbrella of wisdom and clairvoyance. And so I wrote another letter to all of the press, right? And then the trade's published right when I started to make this is the first long form that I've done in a while. When I started to do this for the first time, the trade's published that at that exact time he was acting in a film in France. And then it became clear. Then it all, right? Like perhaps they have used my scene, right? It's the most badass scene anyone ever sent him, right? But it also tracks that he was acting on that film and had a trailer, right? And so he would go out and say, hey, what's up, motherfuckers? Yuck it up. Like, oh, yeah, like a badass me. Like, oh, I'll make all these bitches take their shoes off. And then he closes his door and meditates on my suffering, right? He's a dangerous, sociopathic, evil man, right? And so now we've established this pattern of behavior, haven't we? There's 3 different instances, but if you include Sundance, it's 4. That any time that he's doing anything as it pertains to him working, right, in the industry, that he is going to torture me and make my life miserable because he has created this condition where he has to perpetually lie to everyone about me. That every time he does anything, right, he's reminded of me. He's reminded of the fact that there is an actor in the world who didn't bend to his psychic whim. He's reminded of the fact that he set up $1 million event resting solely on his psychic clairvoyance and he got humiliated. He's reminded of the fact that simple honesty could have got him everything that he wanted. But his convoluted mind games got him nothing that he wanted. And so now he's steeped in it. He's steeped in bile to such an attenuated degree that now it is so imperative that we have disclosure because all that's left is outright evil. Right? All that's left is him actually sending someone here to murder me, or him and the degenerates that all call him master actually burying me in disgusting black magic evil. Right? Until I do in fact get AIDS, or they do torture me into a perpetual hospitalization. And again, they can't help me. The whole time I was in the hospital, it was awful. I smell mushrooms, needles, whenever I want. Like, no, this is his game, right? Like, this is, right? He showed me that little bit of light, right? That, I just had to, right, trust it, right? And then when I didn't trust it and I cowered away, he turned it into absolute pitch black and said, oh no, I'll destroy you with the same facility. And it was very subtle and it was coy, like it was like this seductive thing where he tried to like trick me out of my sanity, out of my life. And now, right, all that's left is evil. Right? And I've left so many voicemails with William Morris Endeavor. Right? I called them every day for like a month. So are you aware of what's occurring? Like, how do you look at yourselves in the mirror? This is the most disgusting, highest evil that anyone can practice, etc., etc., etc. And on one level, it caters to his conspiracy that I appear insane. But on a more fundamental level, right? They're all looking at him and wondering, like all of them, everyone around him, right? Like, is he actually torturing this man? I suspect they all know what he's into. I suspect that any number of people, they're all fully aware of the type of shit that he's into. As far as esotericism, occultism, right? Clairvoyance, remote viewing, etc., etc., etc. So, now I have to talk about it every day. And so I'm going to be sending this out. I'm going to be promoting this video. A lot of times in the beginning, I would read from my writing, I would sing a song, I'd recite Shakespeare, and I can do all of those things, but rather than do any of those things, why don't we just talk about the science of the soul for a time? All of life emerges out of inert space, out of blank, seemingly dead space. It's not dead space, it's inert space. And that occurs through the abstract intellectual quality, often referred to as God. It has no personality, it has no gender. It is all things. And so, you can say that life is an accident, and therefore consciousness is also an accident, and therefore psychic phenomenon is also an accident. I feel that holds no weight intellectually, and this is why I wrote David Berlinski, because he's written at least 2 very famous books on the subject, The Devil's Delusion, as well as Science After Babel. So you could be a godless heathen, right? Any number of philosophy majors proscribe to that ideology. But right, Socrates is my teacher. Right? And so the last thing that he discusses is the immortality of the soul. Right? And so that soul energy, right? The thing that keeps your heart beating, right? The thing that allows you to conjure an image in your mind is the abstract intellectual origin of life. And so it exists perpetually perfect in a state of rest. It is the stillness between heartbeats. It is the fulcrum with which motion revolves within and around. For I am within all things centering them, and without all things controlling them. But I am not those things which I center or control. Walter Russell. Suspended in perpetual stillness is the perfect abstraction that is God. The first corruption or deviation from God could be described as the demiurge, right? The lords of the world. The first 2 emanations of the Kabbalah, Bilah and Chokmah, wisdom and understanding, which to me is an infinite complex nesting of polyhedra and the actual impetus for motion, the actual celestial zephyr that breathes upon the quantum hologram, which is this infinite complex nesting, right? So immaculate, so dense, right, that it cannot express itself as a complete totality, right? That it has to be corrupted through motion, which engenders collapse. And so as space is collapsing, right, a large volume into a small volume, it's engendering through the dihedral angles, right, which engender the collapse, a specific geometric scaffolding or archetype within the quantum manifold, as well as electric resistance as friction grating against itself. Space is collapsing, it's creating friction, engendering a specific structural integrity until the electric resistance becomes so high that it can no longer remain inert space and erupts into incandescence as matter. This is how all life comes to be. right? And though it is a leap of faith on some level, it is rooted in sound logic. And so the clairvoyant does the same thing, though most of them, just like the poets in Apology, in the trial of Socrates, they have no understanding of what's occurring, right? And Sweet Religion makes a rhapsody of words that the poets are just writing, it's a channeling, and that's true with most clairvoyants. But what they're actually doing, right, is engendering an electrical field within their minds through concentration. Just like the divine abstraction engenders material matter through concentrating and collapsing space upon itself. So, when Albert Pike says a thought is a force and philosophy should be an energy, he's not talking about clairvoyance in any way, but it touches on it perfectly. He's talking about using your thoughts as inspiration to do good works in the world. Right? And so the highest levels of understanding is the recognition that love is the engine of creation. That nothing takes. Everything gives and gives and gives unconditionally of itself forever. The sun, the earth, everything. Nothing has any concern for what it receives. And it's only on these very rarefied stratas of complex biological life that you even see notions of organ systems requiring sustenance, right, which compels the need to kill, to eat. So, the clairvoyant concentrates, which engenders a change in brain waves, a novel neuronal synaptic firing, which creates a membrane of an electric field that they can then push out. A thought is a force, right? That they can push it out, right? They can convolute it in, right? And this is what the remote viewer does. And on the highest levels of that, it's quantum entanglement, that they are harmonizing the superposition of the atomic structure of their brain, of their body, right? Of their conscious field, their individual conscious awareness, with the atomic structure of the disparate locale. And in their meditative reverie behind the eyelids, inside of the psychic crucible of the mind's eye, that they're allowed to actually see what is occurring at the place that has the same polarization of its atomic structure. Right, again, most of them don't understand any of this, but that's what's actually occurring. So, this is the worldview that I prescribe to, right? And so this is what Quentin has been doing to everyone around him for a long time. And I could say a lot about that, right? But rather than say everything that I could, why don't we just talk about his daughter for a while? His daughter's really a little girl. In 2022, I believe they welcomed her into the world. No name is known. In my novel, her name is Willow, because I know a girl named Willow. Perhaps her name really is Willow. I don't know. But Willow Hoffman, right? Quentin's name is Alistair Hoffman. And so the short story that I'm writing now is perhaps the beginning of me rewriting the novel that I've written about this, which is at the end of them shooting Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But, so we have this condition in our minds, right? That we have this magnetic constitution engendered primarily by the heart, but by the brain too. The magnetic field of the heart is the true spark of the auric egg, as the psychic medium would say, the magnetic body that surrounds any human, any life form that is a mammal that has a heart. I suppose they don't have to have a vertebrae or be a mammal, but anyway, my point is that every time, right, that Quentin has his family, that they're actually like they are a family. Right, it's him and Danielle and their two kids, right? That they all live together and they spend all their time together, and so naturally, right, their psychic constitutions are intimately connected, right? The electrical condition of their brains are intimately connected, and so when you create this condition in your mind, when you engender this thought force, that while there are instances quantum entanglement, and I think that yields the highest resolution of image. You can also just send your thought force out like a radio signal. And so this is what engenders you to call your friend after thinking about them, right? Because they were thinking about you too. And all these like instances of seemingly arbitrary synchronicity. That what's actually occurring is that it's a thought force. It is an electrical field that is engendered by your thoughts, right? The actual thought is non-local, but it creates a locality as an electrical membrane or field of intention, which you push out omnidirectionally into all of creation. And so my point is that as far as the daughter, right, as far as the daughter goes, right, and again, I'm a stark raving lunatic. I know, I get it. I don't fault anyone for, right, even though it's like clear steps in logic. Like, ask Robert De Niro, ask Mike Simpson, his agent, ask the guy who checks the mail at 1822 North Vermont Avenue. There's like a dozen people. Ask Brad Pitt, ask, all these people. Ask Daniela, ask aemanuel, right? Like, all these people know who I am in relation to the movie and the movie critic. Right? Like, put me on a polygraph. Put me and Quentin on polygraphs. Right? But right, my point is that when they were plaguing my mind with all of that awful shit about his daughter being a hooker who like gets bukkake poured all over her, and it's pulled straight out of his movies. It's funny, like it's a joke to them, right? That was all an electrical condition, right? That's a membrane of a magnetic field and an electrical field that he pushed out omnidirectionally into creation, and it absorbed into his daughter every single time. That she has, right, an egregious amount of psychic baggage that will hover over her psyche forever, right? That it's there. Hopefully nothing occurs. I don't want anything to, I don't want her to become a slut who gets AIDS. That's not, right? That's never what I wanted, right? But that's unfortunate to consider that he understands so little about what he's doing, right? That he's also perhaps done real psychological damage to his daughter that she will never fully understand because they'll never discuss this openly. So, if the things that I'm saying are true, and though they are not all objectively provable, it is all objectively true. What is the solution? In truth, there is no solution. Right? As long as he expects us to persist in this way, he is resigning himself and anyone else who's involved with this to a level of mental illness that is egregious and exorbitant. And so that's like it's always going to be this ugly thing in our minds, that we exist as goblins in the other's mind, as psychic phantoms. So we can reconcile, right, and spend some time together, so that all of our memories aren't these sick perversions of thought engendered by his perpetual remote viewing of me, which again, right, is some 500 hours now. I like to say 200 or 300 hours, but really it's more. It's 400 or 500. Right? Or he can privately pay me, right? If he doesn't want to tell the truth, right? Or he can publicly tell the truth about the movie. Right? But as long as we persist in this way, I have no choice but to assume that he wants me to die. That he didn't do all of this for us to persist in this way for 20 years. That's a dangerous psychological condition for him. And so this is why I'm talking about it, because I do live in palpable fear that any day he's going to hit his breaking point and just make the call, right? And I'm assured, right? Oh no, I can't do that, right? But I also was assured a lot of things, right? And so my point is that I can't trust any of these things that I'm told in the psychic crucible of the mind's eye. And so that's why I'm talking about it. Like, he got what he wanted. Right? That they eventually like caved and said, okay, Quentin, he's insane. Do they believe it? I don't know. It's none of my business, right? That this is like, I'm only discussing this now because he's left me no choice. Right? And I can't live my life in perpetual fear, right? That's what he wants, right? That he wants me slobbering mad in the corner going, oh no, the assassins are right around the corner, and all these things. And so I can't, I have to right? I have to pick up the pieces, right? I'm starting to write again, right? I'm playing guitar, I'm acting in 12th Night, right? I'm doing the things that define my life, which is the arts, right? He doesn't own art. He doesn't own writing, right? He owns his films, right? And so my point is that he made a simple misstep. That's all. Like, it's not like people do it all the time, right? In putting all of that on his psychic clairvoyance, because it's a perversion to me. It doesn't excite me. It doesn't turn me on. And when he refused my letter in that moment, it upset me to such a degree that I just felt obligated to leave, to be a stubborn ass. And I hated myself for months. That's why I abandoned all of my possessions and my job. But now I see he obviously isn't actually a cool guy. That's like, I made the right decision, as difficult as it has been, is, and will forever continue to be. Because, right, a cool person would have said something to me. Just a single sentence. Right? Said, "You blew it, fuck you, buddy." And then made his movie. Like, who cares? Who cares? Oh, you don't want me to review movies and protest? Pay me. This is how you made your money. You don't want me doing what I do, right? Like, I care about writing. Yes, I care about acting. And I wanted to do a good job for him, but not at the expense of the sovereignty of my mind. And so, right, I have my shortcomings, right? And so, right, I have no choice but to mire in my psychic facility forever as a result of this campaign. That we're always going to be, boom, right there, right? At the forefront of each other's minds. Because every time you remote view someone in the way that the two of us have been, right, it creates an exponential increase in the depth of the electrical braid that binds the two of you together. And so the first time he remote viewed me in December, our minds became 4 times more connected. And then the second time it became 9 times more than that, which would be 36 times more than the first time, or than the baseline. Right? 4 is 2 squared, 9 is 3 squared. Right? On and on and on and on and on this goes. Right? And so what's 500 squared? Man, what is that? 250,000? Yeah, 250,000. 250,000 times stronger than it was, right, when we began this saga. And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Right? At any point, he could say, "No, I'm fed up with it. I can't get this guy out of my head, right? I'm not going to make him kill himself. There's only one way to solve this, and that's to murder him." Right? Which again, he can and will always deny. But my point is that rather than just like immediately dismiss me and say, "Oh no, how unfortunate," right? Quentin has to endure this man. Like, why don't anyone just like do something to actually prove me delusional? Right? Why don't anyone just like ask his agent, Mike Simpson? Right? Ask Robert De Niro. Ask Brad Pitt. Right? So, if the things that I'm saying are true, it is the pinnacle of evil. Remote viewing and clairvoyance is a wisdom, right? That they say all of these things. They say magic. They say sorcery. They say telepathy. They say telekinesis. They say psychokinesis. They say thaumaturgy. They say remote viewing. They say clairvoyance, right? That it's all the same thing. No, it's one word. It's wisdom, right? It's the recognition that mind is everywhere. That mind is the progenitor and perpetuator of all life. And so, on the highest levels of this understanding, again, is a bifurcation, a twofold understanding. The first of which is the healing of the sick, is nuns praying over sick people, right, taking their diseases into them, right? These are all documented things, right? And so I invite anyone to look into Michael Talbot's The Holographic Universe. He discusses this, right? The idea being that in terms of information, this is pre-Reuben Boehm's holographic model, in every cubic centimeter of space, in terms of information, lies the potential for all of manifested reality. And so in these great moments of spiritual reverie, of communion with the deity, right, that what's actually occurring, right, is these nuns, these pious people, these holy people, that they're actually fracturing the hologram, right, that all of reality comes out of the abstraction and into the material, and rearranging it, right, and destroying the diseases and the illnesses that plague the people that they're praying for, that they're fasting for. Absolute devotion, right? And so on the other side of that, right, which is the same power, it's the same power, is the effort of the adept, the student, to fracture the hologram to give someone diseases, to destroy someone with their mind. And so that's the purest evil anyone could practice. That's the definition of absolute degeneracy. And so this is why we're talking about it. I know that he's always going to lie. I see that now. I do understand that. But it doesn't mean that I can go the rest of my life without discussing it in the open air, clearing the air. Right? It's fine. It's fine. I'm a loser. I'm a loser. You gave me an opportunity. I didn't want to be intuitive in that moment. Beyond that, I wanted you to take my letter. I was prepared to give you whatever you wanted. I had 10 questions. I was ready. Right? But you wanted to turn your back on my writing again for the third time. Right? Once right when he canceled the film. Again, a week before Tribeca, and then there in the moment. And I calculated it all in my head, and again, I hated myself for months as far as like seeing the 5-act structure of it all, that was supposed to be the big reveal. Right? And I decided to be stubborn and proud, and the reality that he doesn't like to admit is that that's my right. Right? That I don't have to bend to your psychic will. Right? I don't have to do that. And so I never have. I've submitted to him in a palpable way as far as giving him the same for free. And that's bullshit. If he's using it, he should pay me because it's mine. It's my intellectual property. And everything that I said was under duress, and I'll still sue him if he uses it, and he'll pay me. He doesn't want me saying these things in front of a court stenographer. It's bad enough that I say them on here. So I have to talk about it every day because even though he's proud, he wants it to end too. He doesn't. Right? There's no formula where he goes the rest of his life just outright denying me. Right? When he can say, I gave him a shot. Right? Like he can say that. He can say, like, that's my fault. It's my fault. Right? And so he doesn't want to admit that he put his trust in a loser, his definition of a loser. And I know I'm not a loser. I'm just not what Quentin Tarantino wanted me to be. And so that's, right? It's fine. It's fine. And so in his mind, he hates me for reducing what he does to some sick intellectual exercise. And my reply to that is, I didn't do that. He did that. That I did nothing but write letters from the heart, sincerely. That's all I ever did. I never signed up to play any fucked up mind games. Now I have no choice but to play them. I'm mired in it forever. Forever. Perhaps in 5 years it'll get better. But if you understand what I've been saying, right, we have a pattern of behavior. That every time he does anything in the public eye, I have no choice but to assume that he's going to, at the very least, have other people make my life miserable so that he can have his mind as best as he is able to have it. And so this is the danger. This is the danger. That as the days continue, right, what he doesn't want to admit, right, is that I am a powerful clairvoyant. And the first time that he jumped into my mind, he bound our souls together forever. And I never wanted to play. I did everything that I could just to get like a simple fucking word out of this guy. And so now I see it was all a sick intellectual exercise to make me appear insane, to make me blow my brains out. And so now all that's left is vulgar evil. And so I don't want to play. On some level, I have no choice now. I have to assume, right, as the days continue to pass, right, that if he's not outright evil, right, I have to protect myself. And so I have to give it back to him in equal measure. As long as he leaves me alone, we're good. But I'm allowed to talk about it. I'm allowed to remote view anyone I want. He doesn't own my mind. He can move on with his life. But at any day, right, any time, right, just think about it rationally. Just think about it rationally. That the amount of time that he has spent remote viewing me, right, 500 hours, 400 hours, right, is enough to engender an extreme psychological condition in anyone. Right? Therefore, by us not reconciling, by us not forging any real memories together, by us persisting in this way, he's resigning both of us to a level of mental illness that is not healthy. That is not healthy. For him to involve his daughter in this way, right now, every time he looks at his daughter, he thinks of me. Anytime he does anything with work, he thinks of me. Right? And I could keep rattling off that list for a long time. Right? Anytime he talks to his agent, right? He thinks of me. Aemanuel, they think of me, dude. Me and him, we're intimately connected forever. And so he says that I tarnished his whole career, but I say that he did that by his behavior. Because again, right? All I ever did was write letters from the heart. And so, I suppose I'll go. I don't really know what else to say. But all of life is expressing a noble divinity. That the highest levels of understanding yield clairvoyance as a result of understanding how life emerges out of seeming dead space. That space and matter are equal opposites of the same coin, and it's through the same intellectual reflex and pressure that God manifests matter out of space that the clairvoyant remote views people, heals the sick, or seeks the destruction of their enemies. It's all the same tactic. And so, the last thing that I'll discuss is the necessity for evil. I've discussed it before, but the critics, the naysayers, they say, oh, how can evil exist in a world that's created by a divine creator, a divine benevolent creator? And that's a crass answer, or a crass question that I've never been particularly keen on. But the easiest answer is in physics, right? So if we say that all of life stems from some abstraction, right? And it emerges in the material world through an intellectual reflex, an intellectual pressure upon, right, an abstract idealized form, which manifests its crepuscular shadow in the material world as matter, elements, stratas of life, etc., etc., etc. That if everything is a mental construction, right, then it must emerge out of some psychological mirror. That it has to have an abstract, right, intellectual origin with which to evolve within and around and be reflected into the material world thereby. And so, in order for life to flourish, everything cannot grow unconditionally. Right? If everything just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, the whole universe would be one static photon. But there has to be rhythms, there has to be cycles of life. And so there's growth and there's decay. And so in physics, they call this inherent vice, that there's something corrupted, inherent in nature, inherent vice. That there's something inherent in nature that compels it to decay and die. So, if decomposition, decay, and death is an absolute axiom and necessity for life to flourish and perpetuate, and if we say that everything that we see in the manifested material world stems from some intellectual, psychological mirror, which is an eternal abstraction, then therefore, evil exists in a world created by a benevolent God as a psychological mirror to inherent vice in nature. That it must be within the mind of man, because otherwise nature would have no blueprint with which to decay and die around. So, see what's good in your life. Know that life is not an accident. Do something nice for someone else. Don't squander your opportunities. I live on the business end when you live in fear. So no more fear. Disclosure. God bless. Let me know what you think.